Welcome to Puck Academy, a show about how hockey players grow on and off the ice. I'm Jason Jacobs, the host, and each week I talk with players, coaches, and experts shaping the future of player development. Today's guest is Trevor Edwards. Trevor was a 4-year varsity hockey player at Clarkson University, Division I, and he's currently the GM of the Dubuque Fighting Saints in the USHL. He's also very involved in the Pittsburgh Penguins Elite Youth organization, where he was the director of player and coach development and is now head coach of the 16U team, head coach of the Mite Development Program, and a skills coach for the Excel Hockey Academy. I was excited for this one because Trevor is a hockey dad. He's very involved at the high-end youth level, and he is involved in a storied program in the USHL. We have a great discussion in this episode about Trevor's path in the game, his thoughts on how the game has been evolving, and we spent a lot of time talking about some of these nuanced topics around self-direction, IQ, the role of parents, the role of coaching, what works, what doesn't work, lessons learned, and advice for parents and players that are trying to navigate as the landscape is changing so quickly under our feet. I really enjoyed this one, and I hope you do as well. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason.
First question for you. I emailed you cold, and you're an impressive hockey guy with a great pedigree in the sport, and you somehow said yes to my little show. So I didn't ask you this in prep, but I'll ask you now. Why didn't you tell me to buzz off?
Great opening question. I mean, to be honest, at first, the first feeling was, exactly what you just said, right? Like, wait a second, who the hell's, reaching out to me to do a podcast like this? And then honestly, I did a little bit of research, looked at a lot of the people that you have on the show, and we just kind of went over this in the prep a little bit. Like, you seem like just an intrigued person that wants to help educate the hockey community and the hockey world. And you asked a lot of good questions in some of the other podcasts that I kind of just tuned in. I started kind of listening to a few of them, and got added to my playlist. So that was the reason, and I appreciate when people take interest in the sport and want to help educate both players and parents and others in the sport. So thanks for reaching out.
Well, I appreciate you making the time. And yeah, I've entered new categories before professionally outside of this project. And yeah, if you come in as a newcomer, initially people are like, who the F is this guy? And why is he chasing around all my friends? Right. But over time, if you just, I think I even heard you talk about this on the Hockey Think Tank about the sport, right? That like patience, long view, one foot in front of the other, just get up and try to do the right thing every day, and find a positive and see the learning from every, like it's not a failure if you find a positive and you learn and apply it, right? And so I'm just trying to take that approach, and the hope is that over time, the body of work speaks for itself, right? As I become more known, as more guests come on the show that are familiar to people, as they can speak to their experience on the show and the inbound that they get from it, and the old friends they hear from, and stuff like that. And I just found it's a really incredible way to learn. And selfishly, get connected in a new space and build a following that can then be applicable once I figure out if and what I might end up building here. So, but yeah, getting high quality guests to come on and educate me and educate listeners is essential for that. And so I'm so grateful for you making the time, because you are absolutely a high quality guest. GM of a storied USHL team, played Division I at Clarkson, which one of my best friends from growing up, he played hockey in high school, but he wasn't good enough to play at Clarkson, but he went to Clarkson. Just missed you. He's a little older, but yeah, kind of storied college program. And then even the club program that you're involved with at the youth level, I think that, U14 team that you coach, and I know you're involved in other ways, but aren't they like top 5 in the country?
So far, so good. Kids are learning. We got a really talented group. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, thank you for all of that. I just consider myself very fortunate. Been surrounded by really good people. Found my way into and within several really, really high quality organizations along the way, and have learned a lot and continue to learn a lot every day. So I'm just thankful to be in those types of environments. And, just like you, I just want to keep learning.
I mean, my admission to you, since you admitted, your admission to me about, wanting to blow me off initially, which I don't hold against you, but I mean, I would want to blow me off if I got me in my inbox. When I invited you on, it was the hockey pedigree. It was the, USHL, and I mean, all the things we just talked about. But actually in prep for the show, I've uncovered that, you're very much long view, very much, kind of life's hockey success and life success need to go hand in hand. Academic, like I know you did some philanthropic stuff at Clarkson and won a sportsmanship award, right? And that, just as a dad, as I'm trying to figure things out with my own kid, and if I were ever to build something in the space to help others, which I'm thinking about, I wouldn't want to do anything that just optimized only for short-term hockey gain, right, at the expense of long-term life path, because that wouldn't align with my values and wouldn't feel good to me as a person. So I was really pleasantly surprised to find out as I was prepping for this discussion that you are philosophically aligned in that way.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think you just stick to trying to do the right thing, right? Just like we ask our players to find the right play, right, when they play the game, and to every day show up with that right mindset and work ethic, and just try their best. I think I've tried to live by that in my coaching and management along the way. And even when I played the game, that was how I tried to play it, right? Like, and maybe to a fault at sometimes where you try to follow the direction of the coach, try to follow the direction of the team, do whatever it takes. Kind of taking that to my coaching with the kids, and trying to educate parents and try to teach them. And, some of the lessons are ones that you learn through your own trials and error. I was pretty fortunate to start coaching at a pretty young age, in a unique situation, coaching and having, stepchildren at a young age myself that were a little older. So I could I don't want to say they were guinea pigs, but, you kind of learned maybe some lessons along the way that you may never have gotten at a younger age in the coaching world, just because of the circumstances, right? So, it's been fun, and just continue to keep trying to pass that on. And like even today, I love, like, I help run our advanced might program here in Pittsburgh, working with 6, 7, and 8-year-olds and their parents to try to guide them. And really it's like therapy every week as you deal with a lot of the stuff that comes with either coaching at the 14U, level, or running a USHL franchise at, getting on the ice with the 8-year-olds can cure your day. Anything maybe that, just seeing their smile and trying to provide them with the, fresh excitement for the game.
I want to start with something that you didn't cover on the think tank, because I wanted to try to get some new learnings, even though if the audience that didn't listen to the think tank probably would want to cover all the basics, like how'd you get into the sport and your path and that. But one thing that I learned was that your dad was a coach. And one thing I'm curious about is, it seems to me like an outsized amount of players who end up progressing far in the game have parents who either played the game at a high level, coached the game at a high level, or both. Do you share that observation? Like, are you seeing that as well? And if so, why do you think that is?
I mean, in the end, you're a product of your environment typically, right? So, my dad was a hockey coach growing up and provided, those early learning moments. But I think more importantly, it was like an environment and a passion that kind of brushed off on me as a teenager. He encouraged me to look at the other side of the sport, which is the teaching component, right? So he was always one that would say, like, you learn from having to teach it yourself, right? You get a different perspective and you start to understand what the coach is going through and what they're trying to teach. And it helps the player then understand, what they're going through. And I've done the same thing with my children, had them involved in the spring and summers, helping coach at the youth levels and giving back. And it gives them a different perspective, within their playing as well, and a different love for the game and building those relationships and bonds. And I think, my dad definitely, had me involved doing them. So when I played when I was 9 and 10 years old, I was in Toronto. The first junior Canadians, when they first switched from a AA program to a AAA program, that was my first years of AAA hockey in the Toronto area. And my dad was the head coach and my grandfather was our trainer. So he was an ambulance driver in Toronto at the time and dedicated his time. So it's like I was surrounded by family, right? And kind of got me started in the sport. And, I didn't have my dad as a coach all the way up. When I went to Ottawa, they wanted non-parent coaches involved in the program along the way. But he was always there to kind of help provide guidance. So he'd suck me in the summer times in the summer hockey programs. And it's kind of neat even today, like, some of the kids that I coached as a student coach in the summer times with my dad, I now see as parents along the way right now. They've got kids that are growing up and are in their draft years coming up and other things. And they call me and ask for advice. And they're kids that I literally, coached. I had kids at an early age, so I'm a little ahead and have learned the lessons already. And even ex-teammates of mine that have kids now that are, 13, 14, 15 coming up. It's kind of neat to circle back.
One of the things that I ponder, it's a little bit of a kind of chicken and egg, because it seems like a lot of people, smart hockey people, talk about how important environment is to development, but then those same people, or maybe it's not the same people, but an equal amount of smart hockey people, let's say, talk about how you should be hands off and you should take your kid's lead and, let your kid guide and be there to support, right? But if the best comes out of being around the right environment, but you want the kid to lead, like the kid isn't equipped to be able to seek out the right environment, right? And so it just feels like a bit of a chicken and egg, right? Around like letting the kid lead, but also providing the environment. What's your advice for how to navigate that tension, and how do you think about it?
That's a great question. And I think part of it depends on the environment you're talking about and what's available to parent. And, I guess I would say, for the most part, what I've seen at the younger ages is if a hockey parent, that played the game is able to help create the environment that's positive, fantastic, right? Like, you run with it, you can be, and I think that parent coaching often gets a mislabel at the youth level, because people are so focused on like, oh, they get the ice time or they get preferential treatment, right? We want a non-parent coach that's thinking about the whole group. And I think a lot of times what gets lost in that is that a lot of times a good hockey person that can create a positive environment for everybody is way more valuable, right, than those 2 minutes or 2 shifts that you may perceive as they're getting favorable treatment on, right? So I think that, always, I give parents, the advice I give all of them is like, you go where the coaching is and where the good people are, right? You surround yourself with good people. And once your kid is in that environment, if you're able to step away as a dad and be or a parent and be a parent, fantastic, right? You let the player can gain some independence, and they can run with it. If you bring value and can add to that environment, then be involved, right? And as a hockey coach or parent or whatever you are in that scenario, then you've got to learn how to separate hockey coach from dad in that moment, right? And provide that. So, it's a tricky one because you bring the emotions of being a parent involved into coaching. But for me, it's just all about the environment surrounding and being, in the best place you can from a development standpoint. And both that, and when I say that, I think, like what I mean by development environment is both on and off the ice, right? From a character standpoint, how they're treated. The organizational skills mean a lot, right? I think that's one of the most overlooked areas of the youth hockey area is how the programs are managed, which creates a certain environment, right? If you have a disorganized environment that's unprofessional, it does create a level of chaos, right? And chaos breeds dysfunction in a lot of ways in the youth hockey world. So, it's a tough question. You're right. It's absolutely a double-edged sword and kind of at times people can be contradictory, I guess, in their advice. But again, I think it just all comes down to the people involved.
I want to ask a similar question around, you have all these storied, whether it's a club or a prep school or, even, climbing the ladder, but take a school like Shattuck, for example, or a program like Honey Baked or the Mission or the Penguins Elite, or right. How much of the success of these programs, and I'm not asking about any one specific one because I'm sure the answer varies, but generally, how much of it is about development in your observation versus just recruiting the best talent and then not taking credit, but I think receiving credit because look how good we are, right? So it's like how much of that development is happening internally versus just plucking kids from wherever they are that are already the best?
I mean, that's a great question. Obviously, none of the programs that are mentioned. Let me reword that. So some of the programs mentioned, right, run programs from 8U, right, or younger all the way up, and others don't, right? So, but there is different types of development that happen at different times of the players' careers, right? So I don't want to discredit a program that maybe is bringing players in at 14, 15 in the development that they do provide, because the culture and the development at those ages is critical to the player's ability to continue to progress, right? Especially an elite athlete, one that's maybe ahead of the curve. They face a different set of challenges, right? Like there's pressure and there's, outside pressures beyond just their own pressures on themselves to perform that need to be navigated and need to be developed. And I think sometimes getting the best out of those athletes at that level is just as difficult as developing maybe a player that's underdeveloped at that point, right? And trying to get them to catch up maybe to an elite group. So it's different, but the programs that do like start from the bottom, and do build a player from that youth, might squirt level up, like, I give them a lot of credit. And it's something that was why I came to Pittsburgh in the first place, like was to lead that type of mission. Here in Pittsburgh, I thought it was holistic. I thought it was the best, right? Like the bottom of the funnel. And that's what I've been in charge of here for a long time. And it's, can you have organic development, right? Where kids are playing the game at an advanced level because of what you did when they first learned how to play real hockey, right? So that, and to be honest, Jason, that's why I'm coaching the team that I'm coaching today, right? The 14U team was my first team and group of players that I had here in Pittsburgh when I came here in 2018. So I came here, they were mites.
Was it the 05s or something that you had from like dev program all the way through midgets?
So I had the 2000 birth year at Honey Baked. So literally from squirt minor or Adam minor through midgets. I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes in that process, right? And, I went through that process, and I think we ended up, as we got to midgets, we ended up with about 6 original players from day one to the end. And it was like, in Detroit, that was like an accomplishment, and if I look back at those rosters, there was a lot more than that succeeded in hockey. But there's kids in that, again, just the natural churn of high-level AAA hockey. It was hard to continue to be patient through that process, especially in Detroit, where you had a lot of competition for players, right? So you're battling Caesars and CompuWare and Bell Tire and these guys for your players every year, and that was an accomplishment. In Pittsburgh, it's a little different. We don't have the same level of internal competition in the city for the player, So I don't have the exact stat in front of me, but I believe from this group here we have about 12 right now of the original, kind of groups within Penn's Elite. to me, can you develop, like, that's a true test of like athlete development is, you take kids at those younger ages and can you continue to bring them along, even though you have some variables that you don't control, right? Like genetics is not one that we control in this process. And it's a true test of, can you survive, the evolution of physical maturation at the highest level and still, have players that play the game with their brain and their skill at just such a high level that they can overcome that sometimes. So anyway, I guess you're getting me onto a whole soapbox there, and it didn't really answer the question directly. I think that some of those programs do a better job than others of being patient with their athletes and actually truly developing versus just recruiting and showcasing them. And I guess we try to, believe here that, that holistically we're doing the right things every day, but I'm not going to lie and say we don't recruit players, right? Like at the end of the day, you need talent, to be at the highest level in the sport at this level. And, there's certain, players and people that are looking for a certain type of product for their player and their families. And then there's others that don't fit. Right. And, I think it's just important that within that process, you stick to what you believe in. And here we believe in education. We believe in off-ice development, on-ice development. And we have a certain program that's set up to mirror those beliefs, right? And sometimes they fit people and sometimes they don't.
Well, I'm going to have a tough time picking the next question because my intellectual curiosity is pulling me in multiple directions given this kind of fertile ground that we've landed on. But I'll take a stab. When I watch some of these higher level AAA teams, sometimes you just watch a team and you're like, man, that is a well-oiled machine. Like they're crisp on the breakout. They're moving without the puck. It almost feels like synchronized swimming or something, right? It's like like fighter jets, like moving in formation. In your view, how much of that has to do with systems? How much of that has to do with like guardrails, and also how much of that is healthy versus unhealthy, given that if there's too much structure, right, it can maybe optimize for winning at the expense of development, creativity, risk taking, et cetera. So
another loaded question there. I would say the mentality of the team and how they practice definitely dictates, how they're going to play. You can definitely tell the teams that have a high level of structure and then coaching staffs that hold players extremely accountable to the structure, right? Because you see the repeatability of certain types of movement patterns, right? And then you can see ones that they look a little more free flowing and creative at times, right? And risky at times. And I think you can tell then what that organization is working on, right? Or that coach is working on. And, how you can tell typically by the movement patterns if coaches are involving a lot of small area games or competitions that require thinking and change of position versus very structured, systematic play, right? Like, again, I'm in favor of developing the brain with the skill set. I think if you come watch a 14U Pens Elite team, you're going to see, I can promise you will see, great passing, high risk involved at times, to a point where I'm probably like given the eye roll or like, the oh my look on the bench at times, and just trying to balance that risk taking with what we would call picking the right plays, which is a player driven exercise, right? So what I would hope, like in today's game, if you watch an NHL game or a college game, you see a ton of interchanging positions and the attempt to create chaos offensively, right? And then defensively, the attempt to limit chaos, right? And to try to get the puck back. That's typically what's seen at the highest levels of hockey. What I hope continues to trickle down into the youth levels is a mirroring of that mentality, right? And I think the ADM models really helped with that overall, right? I do believe that the introduction at the youngest ages of half ice hockey and much more pushing of small area games and development through that has created an acceptance of chaos being okay. It doesn't mean that defensive structure isn't important for a player to learn. And then decision making is important for them to learn. And so to me, when I watch these high level teams, like you said, I scout for a living and I also coach at these levels for a living. Then when I watch teams that are extremely structured, don't take any risk, make zero plays within a hockey game, and yeah, they maybe win 2-1, I'm not overly excited about their player pool. Whereas I see another team that the player seems to manage their risk, but also makes plays. I'm like, okay, that player, that's impressive. He can play within a team structure, but he can also pick his spots and make the right play at the right time. Then you have the extreme opposite of that, where you have a player that plays pure one-on-one, wants to toe drag everybody and slip through the triangle over and over again with no remorse, that he just lost the puck over and over again. And you question, okay, like, is the coach really teaching hockey at that point, which is a 5-on-5 game where you have to mitigate attack mode versus possession and risk versus non-risk, right? It's no different than a soccer or basketball game, 5-on, in those terms, right? So to me, like, that's what I'm looking for. And I hope that youth hockey in America continues to grow and be taught as that versus just a complete structural, old school, try not to get scored on game.
I mean, to use an analogy in a world that I'm more familiar with, like startup investing, I think there's kind of one school of investors that says, like, there's no substitute for like sitting in person and, it's all a people bet. And it's like, models and decks and that's not so important. Like, I need to look them in the eye and I know when I've got the horse that I want to bet on. Right. And then the other extreme is like, I don't barely even need to meet the people because it's all like what the model tells me to do, I listen to, and the model like has access to all this data and, lots of stuff that like, no matter what the person is, if the model says it, I'm going to make the bet. Right. I mean, like most things, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but I want to bring that back to hockey, right? And I want to ask it both with your scouting hat on and with your coaching hat on. How much in each of those is it got to be in person, got to see him live? Like, score sheets can lie, size charts can lie. Like, I just want to watch versus like, hey, I'm going to watch, but I need to complement that with this analytics or this, elite prospects or like how do you think about the balance between that eyes versus data with both of those hats on, the coaching hat and the scouting hat?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that I think it's a balance between the two. So in the youth game, the biggest challenge there is the variance in the opponents, right, that they're playing against in the leagues and levels, right? So if everybody was on the exact same playing field and the data analytics would then show, across the board map against similar competition or, levels of player, you could probably use the data analytics to, players, creating a certain expected goals per game, both individually or team or, offensive generating plays against these opponents, breakout statistics, they would make more sense. But because of the variance, right, in the scouting world, that makes it very difficult to use against other potential players in other markets. It does make it comparable against their peers within their own league or group, right? So I guess we do use both. What I like to say is, like, I mean, in person, you'd get a really good feel for the non-measurables, which are attitude, effort level, interaction with teammates and coaches. There is a certain feel to that does matter within the culture of a hockey team, right? And, in the end, I think it is incredibly important to recognize that ability to impact the game statistically, not just goals and assists, but in other ways is, if you're ignoring that in today's game, your team is probably not meeting or exceeding your expectations, right? Because it is a validation against your eye test to tell you, and it helps you ask questions, right? If a player looks like he is smart and makes offensive plays, but then doesn't generate statistically, the question's why, right? Like what are they not doing? What is keeping them back? And that could be a physical limitation, could be line mates, could be structure, could be like you talked about in the last question of maybe the type of style they're playing, and maybe a new style would change that and bring the best out of them. But it does let you ask the question so that you can be, more prepared in your player analysis. So we definitely use both. Like in Dubuque, we definitely use all the tools available to us to evaluate our player pool and track players, but we definitely don't pick solely or choose solely based on those metrics alone. So I was just in Minnesota this weekend getting the eye test, right, of Minnesota high school. I was in the Northeast Pack event the week before here watching AAA 18U to 14U. In a couple of weeks I'll be over in your neck of the woods watching prep school hockey, and seeing some of the teams at those levels. And so you can kind of get a better gauge as far as the level of play and then how much the statistics really mean, once you kind of have that feel.
I mean, this is related to a topic we covered a little earlier, but I don't feel quite resolved on it. And so I'm going to bring it up again. And it's about self-direction. And I ask because I'm an entrepreneur, right? In my world, like, no one's telling me to do anything. There's nothing for me to keep up with. I'm starting from a blank slate, and I have to be self-motivated every day to try to create something out of nothing, right? And so I learned how to be incredibly self-directed. But if you put me into a system, or in other words, like a big company, right, where I'm like a cog in the wheel and I follow a program and I have guardrails and I can't go where I want, when I want, and right, like I'm not going to last, right? Now, let's bring that back around to hockey. Everyone talks about how they want players that are self-directed, right? It's like, high compete level, passion for or maybe they don't say self-directed, they say high compete level and passion for the game, right? And I think you've even said that on some prior shows I've listened to. But here's what I worry about, right? As a parent, you want to create the right environment, so you end up running around creating the right environment because it's like, well, this would help build more holistic development. This would build more holistic development, right? And then the academies come along, and then it's like, well, you need to centralize that. So it's like a one-stop shop and like far more efficient and easier for the family, better for the kid, more time for studies. And it's like, okay, that's great. But then you kind of get institutionalized, right? Because you talk about long-term and the life path. Now take all that structure away. And what is the athlete left with? Like they get out of the D1 program or whatever, right? And now there's no handlers, right? And it's like, oh, like I need to like create my own schedule and be my own like trainer. Like I never learned how to do that, right? And so I guess as a parent or as a coach, like both what do you look for, but also what do you want to instill? Because I feel like sometimes being coachable and being a good teammate and being part of a system is at odds with building like an independent, self-motivated human.
Yeah, I mean, that's a holistic, huge question there. I think there's a balance between both, right? That you got to find. I think that personally, like, young athletes or young people in general, like my kids and others, while you want them to be ambitious and you want them to have their own voice, right, and own like work ethic and dreams, and the reality is they still, like, that's something that I think long term in life is probably earned, right, through some discipline and work ethic and following timelines and instructions, right? So again, like, I don't think you can jump to that step right away, right? I think this is probably something that, like, you've earned the opportunity through hard work in life. You had to show up to class on time. You had to do certain things to get to where you're at, to earn the opportunity to kind of maybe freelance and have that. I think that, to me, the young athlete and the young player is not necessarily always ready for that day one, right? earn a longer leash, both on the ice, right? And in life over time. So to me, the structure of making sure that they have self-discipline, and that they're building good life habits, and every player is different, right? And it's something that I give my coaching staff in Dubuque a lot of credit for. Evan Dixon's really good at sitting and talking and asking the player, like, what's important to them? What are their routines that fit then within the team structure routines? Like, you have to be on time. That's non-negotiable, right? You have to be on time. Now, your individual goals for the day and what you want to get better at is negotiable. Doesn't mean that within the team structure, they don't have things they're working on. They absolutely do. But conversations about areas of their own development and things they want to do and how the coaching staff could support that, those happen. Those discussions happen. They get written down. They get, and then the athlete is provided with opportunities to then try to grow personally, right? So I think there's a mix, and that has to happen, I believe, at the youth levels as well, which is that conversation between coaches, parents, player, like where the athlete takes the lead, right? Like, I think this is an area that I'm passionate about. This is something I want to get better at. How can you help me, right? Like, to me, that's like real growth, but it is maybe not the norm. And part of it's just like time. Like I do think at a lot of the youth levels, it's, a coaching staff that they're busy, right? And they're running around and they make a practice plan and they make an idea for their team. And we're going to play a 2-1-2 this year. And we're going to play this way in the neutral zone. And we're going to play this way in the D zone. And then this player is going to play left wing the entire year. And he's going to become a master at it. Not going to move him around, not going to let him play a different position. I'm never even going to ask him, I think that doesn't happen much at the youth level. And I think it's probably something in young player development that has to that collaboration needs to take place. But I do think that structure within the young players development, as far as like the self-discipline to learn how to show up on time with the right mentality is important, right? And I guess the double-edged sword and what you're saying, Jason, that I'm kind of getting at is it is a slippery slope and difficult to like not suck passion right out of a player, while providing that structure, So that's the tricky slope, right? Is like the unstructured fun component, because of the lack of like pond hockey and stuff in America, which is, with the weather is just not feasible, right? There's not enough stick time and stuff like that. It's difficult to like not suck that out of them while also providing that like disciplined structure for an athlete's development.
The narrative is confusing for me, and I'll explain. It's like, sport is fun. If it's not fun, we don't do it. You always need to keep it fun every step of the way. Let the player guide. If the player's not getting joy, then like, you can't force it upon them, right? And it's like, but in long term, like, athletics and academics go hand in hand for a life path. It's like, all right, well, let's talk about school. Like, what percentage of the kids like school? Probably not a high percentage, right? Well, why do they do it? Because we make them do it. Well, why is it okay to make them do school and not sports, right? It's like, and then it's like, we coddle kids today, like we baby them, and then it's like, when I was a kid, like I had a job at age 6, right? And it's like, okay, well then why are you so worried about like, it's gotta be fun. It's not like what's wrong with a little like high expectations and structure the same way that we are about school, right? And where's that line? Because it is a long road, I get it. And if the joy's not there, it's not going to sustain. But like, then why don't we let them do the same thing with school if that's really what we believe?
You're spot on. I think it's, and to me, again, I go back to creating, like for the coach, creating expectations of, some listening skills, discipline, but the environment still being fun is the art to coaching, especially at the young ages, right? It's not a, that is really what it's about. It's how you operate within the environment and the attitude and the feeling. And then obviously the structure of what you're teaching at what rate, and how restrictive it can be, which then sucks the fun out of it at times, right? So, I think that that is the art of coaching, especially at the younger levels, is it's really child psychology. Like if you look at the young kids at the youngest ages, how do you get kids to have more fun playing the game at 8, 9, 10? Well, there's one puck, giant ice surface, right? If it doesn't get shared and they're not interacting together, no different than a schoolyard. If you had one basketball out on the schoolyard, right, and nobody shared it, didn't play together, kids would just quit playing basketball, even if there was no adult there, right? They would just walk away. They'd be like, this sucks. I don't want to play with you anymore, So to me, it's how do you get those kids to naturally play the game together, right? How is that environment created? If they have fun sharing the puck, making plays, interacting together, and the coach creates an environment that teaches that concept. So creating 2-on-1s, creating, right, puck possession situations. How do you get the puck back? How do you, like, there's an environment that's created that's competitive, that sucks the juice, either, or puts juice into it or either sucks it out of it, right? That's the art of coaching, I believe, at these youth levels. Even at the top levels, the teams that play the best have a natural level of passion that gets created in the environment, right? So I don't know if you disagree or agree with that comment, but it is not easy to do, especially when you involve parent egos, coach egos, right? They want to win. My hockey rankings has got to look good, right? And that's the hard component of it, is like there's those pressures within the sport, especially at the higher levels, that for certain individuals that are coaching the sport, they can't balance them very well.
So I'm going to push on some more doublespeak while we're on the doublespeak topic. So don't get too caught up if your kid is super good, when they're 10, because the best 10 isn't the best 12 and the best 12 isn't the best 15, and on and on and on. Like, you don't know what you have until post-puberty, post-checking, post-girls, whatever, right? So that's kind of one narrative, right? And the other narrative is, the outliers, like, they always had a little something from the earliest ages. Like, look at Connor McDavid, look at this clip when he was 10, and right? And as the path is getting harder and harder, right? In order to stay on the path, you're having to kind of bend the environment, right, to accommodate the path, which increasingly strays from like the normal path, right? And so as a family, how do you balance like preserving the optionality of progressing in the sport with, especially given that you don't know what you have, with like unrealistic dreams, projecting your parent dreams on your kid, like, dad goggles, believing you have something you don't, right? Just stay in your lane. Like, the sport should be fun for you and every other one who's not an outlier, like the other kid down there, right? How do you, I don't know. I find it hard. Not my kid's not. I'm not saying my kid's going anywhere. He's not, right? But I'm just saying, or I shouldn't say that in case he's listening. But it's not because I even aspire. It's just like, I just want to help him reach his fullest form, and the life path and the hockey path. I know that if done right, they go together, but increasingly it feels like they're at odds.
I don't think that's any different in any other sport, really. Like, I think that all of them,
or musician or acting,
yes,
right? Like,
correct. Yeah. Anything. Like, I think that it's if, depending on your aspirations, and when you like use clouded goggles and you take a real self-assessment, right, of where you're at in this process, trying to find the right place for your athlete to continue to develop both as a person and an athlete. I think that in today's world, it's become, more difficult probably than ever, right? And as costs of everything kind of rise, and again, I don't think that's necessarily just specific to hockey when it comes to that, even though hockey is an expensive sport. It is tough. It's just some tough life choices, right? And I guess what I can say, my feeling would be that if you do have options where you can still continue to be a parent and have oversight of and relationship with your player, that, for first and foremost probably should be taken into consideration. And if that's not available, then try to make sure you're finding an environment that that does provide a holistic development opportunity for them, both on and off the ice. Like that's my biggest piece is, just be careful about chasing athletics only, right? Just make sure it has, when you're checking boxes and you're looking at these things for your athlete, that that you're looking at it holistically from a parent lens, not just a hockey parent lens, but that's a tricky one to navigate in today's world. And unfortunately, in most of the country, the local, just purely local, stay local option has become more difficult to find good options in, right? So now people are looking, but if you look at it in like a whole world perspective, I mean, jobs have turned that way too, right? So more and more people are working remote and traveling and doing different things. So I don't know if it's just like unique to just sport, right? Like it might be a just new way of people are less afraid of shifting around for what they want, whether that's in life and work or life and sport or with their kids. I think it's, people become more mobile and able to do things from different places. So, but again, I think it all goes back to that environment. It's where are you going to get better, both on like as an athlete and a person every day, and value that the most. That's my feeling on it.
Well, this next topic is a lot less of an existential one and a lot more tactical. I've heard you say before that you think IQ can be taught. My assessment is, and I'd love for you to agree or weigh in on your thoughts, because who knows if my assessment is right. That's why I'm talking to smart people like you on the show. But is that your team is limited, but there's just not enough bandwidth, like, a couple skates a week, right? There's too much basic stuff. It's like the team needs to work on the team stuff, right? And then even if you're off doing stuff on your own, which of course most people are at the higher levels, right? It's like the stuff you're working on is the more visible stuff. It's like edges or the strength or speed or shooting, right? But that there's a lot that kind of falls through the cracks, if you will, right? That might be breakout timing. That might be like scanning before the puck gets to you. That might be when to be patient and when to be aggressive. That might be, like it might be a lot of things, right? But that there's a lot in that kind of like a grab all bucket that just falls through the cracks. And I'm calling that IQ. So before I ask you if it can be taught, I just want to stop there. I'm curious, does that match what you're seeing and how you think about IQ as well?
I'm a big believer that, like when we talk about hockey IQ, right? The hockey IQ is decision-making ability to read the play, the ability to make proper decisions. I really think that those skill sets, and when I say it can be taught, typically what I mean by that is it can be taught. Like some people say it's like, oh, you're born with it or you're not, right? The player has hockey IQ or they don't. People learn how to think in life, right? Like you take them to preschool and they know nothing about the process of school and what they're supposed to do. And then they learn, how to do math. They learn how to do lots of different things, all your decision-making skills. I think it's taught at the youngest ages. And I think what the biggest challenge that we have in this sport a lot of times is that the environments that the kids get put in at when they first start playing don't focus on the ability to continue to put the player in an environment that forces them to think and then understand the why component of what they're doing, right? And I think this can be taught at the young age. It doesn't mean every player is going to be advanced at it and become great, but it certainly can be taught at the youngest ages, in my opinion, and I don't think it's focused on enough. I think that, skating development has to happen, right? You can't skate, you can't play this game. That's a given. Puck skills, etc., like they have to come along. But the ability to use them all revolves around decision-making skills. The entire game is just a constant test of decision-making skills and hockey IQ. And that's, I do think that at the younger ages, putting the players in as many environments over and over again with a purpose teaches those skill sets. Once they're older and they're ingrained, it's no different than trying to retrain a teenage child that's never been taught how to, put their clothes in the hamper, right? It's or put their dishes away, right? It's very difficult to teach common sense to a person that's never had to, to learn those skills when they were younger, right? It takes it goes back to habits, right? And trying to retrain those. So I personally think that doesn't mean that it's not up for debate. I think that there's different levels of hockey IQ. There's some people that have intuition and like see things ahead of time that are just advanced. And then there's ones that are way less advanced at it. And as the game gets harder and you get to the junior level, that stuff becomes more and more rare to find elite hockey, brains and thinkers, just because the environment is that much more difficult. It tests that skill even more, right? So I don't know, Jason, you agree or disagree on that?
I think it makes good sense to me. I think what I'm curious about is, you talk about environment and ingraining it in like how you run a practice and doing drills that are more translatable to a game environment, things like that. That makes perfect sense. What I'm wondering is how much of it requires being on the ice with a group of players and how much of it can be done remotely. And out of the things that can be done remotely, how much of it needs to be watching yourself from games and how much of it can be from watching others or some other form of teaching. And the example I would use is, and this gets to some of the stuff I'm thinking about building, right, is like language learning, right? I mean, clearly the best way to learn a language is immersion, like just go move to the country. And if you want to function in that country, you got to learn. And so like, if you want to go to the supermarket, if you want to order a sandwich, if you want to order a taxi, if you want to do anything, you have to learn, right? And so it's like, well, there's motivation, right? Like there's self-direction, right? Because it's survival, right? But there's apps now like Duolingo, for example, that like, they just give you little snackable stuff and they gamify it and they kind of suck you in and get you doing more and more of it. And the next thing you know, like it might not be the same as immersion, but like you at least have a baseline where you can function in a way that's far better than if it didn't exist, right? And so I'm kind of poking at, what might be possible on the IQ front in high touch human ways or in fully technology ways and where there might be value, if any.
I would say that it's a mixture of both. That you can do off-ice education through, video analysis and other things like that. I would say, again, like the habits are formed when the kids are the youngest, when they first start playing the game. There's a mentality that gets created within a player. We talk about we versus me type at a in hockey, right? Players that develop right from day one as a we type player that's constantly trying to include others, share, make plays with others. That's their mentality, right? They typically scan more, right? They're typically more aware of their surroundings because they care, right? Typically the player that's me driven, more puck focused, want to just score, have limited care level, right, of the environment around them. So I do think creating that from day one where there's, I don't want to say you brainwash them, but you're basically through repetition, right, trying to create as many of those players with that mentality as possible, that they care about having fun with their friends, right? And so again, a lot of, whether it's 2-on-0s and 2-on-1s and 3-on-1s or 3-on-0s or, certain passing sequences that lead to something fun where the player thinks it's cool, to be a good friend and a good teammate. I think that helps. Then you add the video component of teaching, those little moments that you were working on and showing them like, hey, this is what this creates and this is awesome. And again, you're creating a mentality within a player as they get older, showing video, but doing it in a way that's constructive. A lot of people use video to show what went wrong, right? Instead of continuing to use it for positive teaching moments. Like you got to be very careful about that, especially with young players. Of using it to shame them, right? You want video to be positive with them and show them. Doesn't mean you don't teach within it, but I think it's important to make sure that you're using it properly. The one piece of video, and this was, if you think about the video, where the video is located, right? Like Live Barn might be at a decent level, right? parent video up in the stands is at a different level. That is not how a player sees the game, right? Eyeballs are in front of you. You're immersed in it. So the view of video is misleading, and it is not, while it can show what happened, it is not good at teaching what is going to happen, right? And what the player is actually seeing. So to me, like the next evolution of IQ development would be some type of camera or something that would show an actual view of what a player is seeing, right? So that, like, again, we've tested some of this in Pittsburgh just like for fun, putting a 360 helmet camera. One of the parents had one time, and like trying to video like a breakout sequence and what they're actually seeing. I've seen some studies where people are studying scanning and the frequency of scanning. And if you look at like some of them, there's some technology out there now with glasses that show the eyes and where the eyes are looking, right, on the ice surface. And it gives people a real good view of how hard it is to see the entire ice surface at the speed the game is played, and the decisions that take place in it. And I do think that stuff, as we go through time here, just like we've seen other technologies evolve, will definitely help development of hockey IQ at the younger ages. And you see some of the VR, right, cameras and stuff now, like where people are wearing headsets for some hockey development stuff and scenarios. I do think some of that will probably help be able to train players at least to have already seen and be able to study environments that they get themselves in on a high frequency rate to make better decisions within that. It doesn't mean it's going to change it and take away from like practice environment being critical, but I think it will help.
I would venture to guess, but I want you to weigh in, that a very low percentage of hockey teams are coached in the way that you're describing from the youngest ages. Is that
like I would say it's under 10% probably.
Okay, so here's the question: for that other 90%, right? And sure, a lot of them just aren't serious enough to care, right? But from that 90%, whichever percentage of it is serious enough to care and wants it, is the only way to get it to go find a team that has it? Or is there a way, and this is with my founder hat on, to package that recipe that the 10% gets and deliver it in a way that might not be as good as if you had the whole immersive experience on your core team, but is a lot better than not having it as a service? It might be in person, it might be online, it might be a mix of both, it might be, digital only, it might be machines, it might be human, it might be a mix of both. I don't know. But like, can you package that recipe and open it up to those beyond the team who want it in a lighter weight way?
Great question. I would say maybe parts of it potentially, right? Like from a like practice structure and planning, like almost like you could say like almost guidebook, right? You could probably create some additional, ways with technology to include things that would definitely help if you think about it, a lot of the people that are coaching at the younger ages that are developing these core skills are people that haven't coached before, right? They're usually parents of kids who, and God bless these people that are volunteering their time to take on an extremely difficult and time-consuming task, right? So I know USA Hockey has made a lot of efforts to try to educate them through their coaching education programs and other things. I think from the technology side, as far as like athlete development, there's probably ways, and I know people have tried video coaching and little apps that have been used for all this stuff like that. Some of it helps a lot. Some of it is confusing, right, to the player. But I think like the hardest piece, Jason, is like this is still like a people relationship culture type of building exercise, right? Like I don't know if you can fully take that environment and create something that would replace it, other than the human touch, right, and the artistry of building positive environments and relationships. I think it is pretty difficult, but I think you could definitely like provide some additional help and training and substance to it.
So for all the hockey families out there that are trying to assess where their kids should play, I mean, you can look a coach in the eye and you can say, like, are they saying the right things? Do I like them? Do I trust them? Do they do the family seem happy? Kind of some common sense human stuff. But when it comes to this stuff that you're talking about, what advice do you have for parents that maybe don't come from the game on how to assess?
Yeah, I would look at the history and reputation, right? Like if they have one in the game. So players and families that have played for them before that you trust, and not necessarily even always questions on their hockey coaching ability, but how are they with the kids? What happens when they lose? Like how do they handle the referees? How do they, what is their general interaction? How are their communication skills? Do they provide feedback and do they, are they approachable? I think that those things are all critical for parents as they look at it. And then I think that, looking at the practice environment, right? Is it, what are the focuses? Is the player appearing to have fun and learn and be taught during the session or sessions? So, I mean, these days with Live Barn and other things, you can typically find if there was a coach that's been coaching, you could probably figure out how to watch, some of the environment and see how the players are treated and what's going on with it. Is it age appropriate? And then leverage resources of, hockey people in the area that maybe would know, right? And no different than if you were going to interview them for a job, or bring them into your team at work, like try to do a little bit of research on their upbringing and them as a person. So, I think all those things are important to consider for young, for parents looking at, what programs are good for their kids. And I know it's a difficult task, but you just try to vet it to make sure that the environment is going to be as positive as humanly possible. I think if your player every year is like loving the sport more the following season, that's a undervalued piece of this. And I think, Jason, you've talked about your own son a little bit, right? Like a lot of players, it's just about continuing to love it and get better and better and better. And as they get older, they have an opportunity then to maybe take it even to the next level. If a player is already advanced and is getting that environment already, then great for them, right? That's fantastic. But I do think that trying to make sure that the environment first and foremost is a positive one where the player can love the game and continue. Because again, you said it earlier, like if a player loves the sport and loves going to practice and the environment is positive, they're going to learn on their own just as much as they're probably going to learn from the coach, throughout that experience. So that's a tricky one though.
I'm so grateful for the time we had. I mean, I wish we had another hour, but I know we've got a wrap here. Is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I did, or any parting words for listeners?
I'm glad you didn't get into the NCAA rule change or any of that other stuff.
Oh, we could do a whole episode just on that. Yeah, the portal and the major juniors, and is the USHL going to merge? I saw that rumor today. So yeah. That's
lots like I said, lots to talk about on that front, and I think that's.
Are you guys going to beat the is it Cedar Rapids?
Cedar Rapids. Oh yeah. Man, yeah, arch rival down the road. That's a big one. We got a big game on Saturday against Cedar Rapids and Mark Carlson. So we got Green Bay Friday night. I'm thankful for you having me on, and I hope that I provided some insight. You asked some great questions that are tough ones to answer. And I think that, again, parting words are just surround yourself with great people, right? And the more you can do that, I know it's a cliche, but the more you can do that, the better off your player's going to be, the happier you're going to be as a hockey parent. And live, I said in the last podcast that I did with Topher, like you just got to live in the moment of staying positive and continuing to encourage people to get better every day. And we use the term win the day in Dubuque. That's our motto. We try to do it every single day, just over and over again on repeat. And I think if you do that, good things are going to happen for you.
That is a great place to end. So Trevor, thanks so much for coming on. Best of luck this weekend. I really appreciate your perspective and everything you do for the game.
Thank you, Jason. Good luck to you.
Thanks for listening to Puck Academy. If you enjoyed this episode, follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and share it with someone serious about their game. See you next week.